On this episode of Between Two Beers, we talk to Aaron Clapham. Shay, who is Aaron Clapham?
Well, he's an absolute domestic football legend, probably the most unluckiest player never to play professionally. A legend down in Canterbury, the all-time record goal scorer with 69 goals in 150 games. Team of the decade, midfielder of the decade, 13 caps for the All Whites, and he recently retired. He took some time out to share some stories with us. And Steve, what did you think of the episode?
Yeah, great episode. Aaron is very articulate, well-spoken, thoughtful. He told some great stories. We talked about the time he lost his passport before the Under-20 World Cup and the chaos that created in America. We talked about his career, why he went so close to a professional career but didn't quite get there despite having all the necessary talent. We talked about the epic Club World Cup match with Team Wellington where they went 3-0 up and ended up losing. We talked about, he reflected on the Christchurch earthquakes of 2011 and the mosque shootings of last year and how that impacted him and the Christchurch community. And we talked about his short-lived career as a TV personality in What Now, a children's programming memory from yesteryear. So yeah, a lot of entertainment there, and I hope you guys enjoy this one. This episode was sponsored by Bruce Holloway, who has recently released his eclectic anthology of 40 Waikato United, Waikato FC, Waibop United, and Melville United match reports. It will be particularly interesting for those interested in Waikato football over the last 30 years. Some great yarns, and he's a very, very talented writer, if I don't say so myself. You can, if you're interested, it's $10. You can email him at cordwainerbull@gmail.com or visit his website, www.matchdayanthology.weebly.com. We will link to those in the show notes if you're interested. You can watch this podcast on YouTube or you can download it wherever you get your podcasts. Hope you enjoy this one as much as we did. Aaron Clapham, welcome to Between Two Beers.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Aaron's beaming in from Christchurch. Me and Seamus are sitting together in a Hamilton studio. So it's all a little bit different. And we're drinking spiced rums tonight instead of beers. So a few moving pieces, few different parts. But yeah, looking forward to this episode. Aaron Clapham, Shay, how do you know him?
I think I only first came across Aaron on an All Whites tour, one of the first All Whites tours when I got in at New Zealand football full-time, probably 2012 or 2013. So prior to that, I'd really only watched him playing. And then, Steve, you were in the States at the same time or around in the same division, or where does your link come through?
Yeah, Aaron and I were both in America at the same time. I went there 2003 to 2006. I think we played in the same conference for the first year or maybe two before he moved to Louisville. And I think at that point, there weren't that many Kiwis over in America. So anyway, we kind of knew who everyone was. I think it might have reached out on AOL or MSN or whatever messenger service ICQ we used at the time. And developed a little bit of a bond. Our playing careers in New Zealand didn't overlap too much. We probably came up against each other a few times when I was playing for Waikato and he was playing for Canterbury. But we sort of loosely kept in touch. I think once he ran a joke competition on Twitter, which I won, and he ended up sending me an All Whites shirt or something. And that might be about the extent of our relationship until now when we've got him on the podcast. So yeah, excited to have you along, Aaron. We're going to start with, as we do, we've canvassed opinions and stories and good anecdotes from friends. One that keeps popping up is during the lead up to the Under-20 World Cup, apparently there was a bit of a lost passport situation, maybe a bit of a decent story behind that. So what happened there?
Yeah, I had an absolute nightmare. It's still a little bit traumatic, and it's I'm horrible when I'm traveling. You know, now I've got to check my passport. I've got to do it like 5 times when I'm at the airport. Make sure it's in the exact same pocket that I just checked that it was in, and I drive my wife a bit crazy. But I can't remember exactly where we were. It was either Costa Rica or Chile. I think it was Costa Rica for a a little tour before the 2007 Under-20 World Cup. So we were going from there to America and then going to Canada for the actual World Cup itself. And in Costa Rica, we were warned not to drink the drinking water, not to drink the tap water, sorry. And I drank the tap water. So I got very, very sick somewhere in Costa Rica, just throwing up, not knowing what was going on, like full fever. I obviously got myself on that flight to New Jersey. And so at that point, I obviously had my passport. I don't remember any of that flight or any of that travel. Got to America. We had about 3 days there in New Jersey. And we played America, and then we were kind of on our way. On the last day, I started to feel a lot better, felt like myself on the day of travel, kind of went down into the lobby. And we're about to get on the team bus, and the manager gave the shout, hey, make sure you've got your passports. So I had a look in my bag in the same spot that I always keep my passport, and it wasn't there. So I don't know what happened. I don't know where it got lost or it got stolen or what possibly happened. But I didn't have my passport, which is exactly what you need.
Yeah. Can I just ask, was Jimmy Hogg the manager?
Yes, Jimmy Hogg was the manager.
What were his
in this scenario?
What his flustered was at that stage? How flustered did he get?
Incredibly flustered. So basically we had like a scramble where everyone kind of tried to find the passport. Hey, do you have Aaron's passport? Check your room. I'd been in like a separate quarantine room as well, like not with my roommates. So we were kind of looking through 3 different rooms, trying to track it down. Everyone went through their bags. They came up with this idea because it was an international tournament. We had kind of printed off passports. So we had a paper photocopy of my passport. And the idea was, look, we'll get that and we'll be all in our team gear and they'll kind of let you through. And, Seamus, you've been on enough tours and Stephen, you've been to America. It's actually a terrifying customs to go through in America. And I've shown up with a passport on a piece of paper and gone, please let me through, please. And they've gone, of course not. There's no way you're getting through with that. I look back on it now, and I think it's a little bit ridiculous. But I actually got left there by myself. They gave me a phone number of the New Zealand consulate and said, jump on the bus back to the hotel, call this number, and they'll try and sort you out. And everyone else jumped on the plane and went to the World Cup in Canada, and I went back to this hotel in like tears, just going, man, what do I do? So yeah, I called the New Zealand consulate, tried to explain everything, went through that, and they basically said, look, we can get you an emergency travel document, which is kind of like a thin, small passport, but it'll take a couple of days. You're gonna have to go to a post office and I called a taxi and went to the post office, and the New Jersey, what was the area? Newark, not New York, Newark, Newark. It's quite a scary place. So I got in a taxi and I explained a little bit of the situation to the bloke, and I told him where I needed to go, and I needed to go to an ATM, and he was like, you don't want to go there. Like, that's not a good area. And I was like, I don't really have a choice. Can you please wait? And this really nice guy kind of like took me to an ATM and then took me to the other place and then took me all the way back. He obviously got a good fare out of it, but he looked after me a bit and told me not to kind of wander down the street there. And yeah, I got my emergency travel document about 3 days later, and I kind of thought everything was great. I'm going to make it to the World Cup. I'm not going to miss it, which, at that time was the most exciting thing in the world. And I went to the airport, and there was a lightning storm. So it's quite common in America, a lot more lightning, and they just do not fly in lightning. So I got to the airport at about 2 p.m. and they just kind of keep pushing things back and delaying my flight and cancelling it. And then you jump on the next one kind of thing. And it got to about midnight. And they said, sorry, we've cancelled the last flight. And I I was like, well, when's the next flight in the morning? And they said kind of 5 o'clock in the morning. So I had about a half-hour trip if I wanted to go back to a hotel. I was paying for all this with my credit card as well. I was 19. I didn't have a job. I was broke. I was putting it on a credit card that my parents had got for me. And I was like, I can't just go back to sleep for 4 hours. So I ended up sleeping at the airport in New Jersey, in Newark Airport, which again is not the safest spot in the world. So it was pretty scary. And then again, same thing tomorrow, delay. I ended up being at the airport for about 30 hours in New Jersey. And then I finally got on a flight. During this whole time, this is pre everyone having a cell phone. It was 2007. So I wasn't in contact with anyone at New Zealand Football, anyone with the team. They didn't know where I was. My parents didn't know where I was. I couldn't communicate with them. I was just by myself at this airport. And I finally got on a plane, but obviously they didn't know that I had got on this plane. And then I landed in Toronto. And they had been kind of coming to the airport every couple of hours to see if anyone was there, if I was there. And then I landed in Toronto, and I'm like, yes, I've finally got here. But I've got this like flimsy little document. It's an emergency travel document. It's basically like a 3-page miniature passport. And because of that, I got stuck in customs for another like 4 or 5 hours.
So that's normally only for people like returning home, right? That have lost their passport and going back to their country of origin.
Yes. So I'm kind of going into a different country with an odd passport, and so it's very questionable. So I get detained and interviewed by a number of people over and over again. So during this time, New Zealand football people have kind of come to the airport and gone, well, obviously he wasn't on that flight. We'll go back to the hotel and we'll come back later, kind of thing. So by the time I convince them that I'm going to the Under-20 World Cup and my team is hopefully waiting for me, I finally get through and I go and I pick up my bag. And then I'm kind of like, shit, what do I do now? I'm just in Toronto Airport and I don't have any way to contact anyone. So I'm at Toronto Airport for another like 2 hours just going, what is going on here? And then finally, one of the people that had kind of been doing rounds every now and then it wasn't even someone from New Zealand Football, someone else. They were like, hey, are you Aaron? I'm like, yes, I am. Please take me back to the hotel. And the crazy thing about like that, listening to that Chris James story, because we're the same age, Chris James and I, but I don't really. I probably had like half a conversation with him, even though our international careers crossed over, even though we were in that under-20s team. I got to the hotel and they were like, oh yeah, Chris James has left.
I thought you were going to say like you've landed in Toronto and Chris has gone the other way and they're like, oh, we'll take you back to the hotel now.
Yeah. So that was my my under-20s experience. I got there the day before the first game, which obviously kind of took me out of that. And then I played a bit in the second game and then managed to start the third game. So yeah, at least I got there and I got to play, which was awesome.
Were you a late call up to that squad? I feel like you and John Neon Sabo were like called into the pre-tour. And then like one of the two of you were selected out of that. Is that kind of accurate or is that not really? Because you didn't play qualifiers in New Zealand.
Yeah, your memory is better than mine. There was I was in America at that time, and my coach was actually great. He was kind of keeping New Zealand football updated on where I was at and what I was doing. And they went on a tour kind of even before then. So that World Cup was in kind of June, July time. And then they went on a tour to South America, to Chile in like March, I want to say. So I got a call up into that. Obviously, it was quite easy for me to come across from America for that. And then that went well. And then I got a call up into that. So I wasn't involved in any of the qualifiers.
And were you in under 17s or you not in the frame for that?
No, I wasn't in the frame really. I was the year below, so I was an under 16 player during that cycle, which is obviously really difficult. I was a late developer physically as well, so I was a year down, and I was very, very small for my age, so I wasn't really in that setup.
That was the same. Sorry, Steve, I want to go one more. Was that the same World Cup where only 2 specialist goalkeepers were taken, and then Roddy Brown was named as the third choice goalkeeper? Who was like a left back? These people.
Poor guy. That's true. Poor guy.
That's true, right?
About it. Yeah, it's true. Yeah, a little camp kind of before it. The absolute poor bloke. I mean, the coaching staff basically went, all right, we want to take 2 goalies and we'll take, what do you have? And it was about 21 outfield players, something like that, instead of 20. And they didn't realize until I think it was even like on the way there, like kind of on that time where I was losing my passport. I think they kind of worked out that they weren't allowed to do it, so they had to name one of the keepers. And it was unfortunately it was Roddy. And the worst thing is, mate, his like you treasure your tops, right, from those tours. Like you absolutely love them. I've got a couple of them framed. His are goalie tops.
Aaron, you came on our radar. Well, you're always on our radar because you're one of New Zealand football's sort of domestic treasures. But you came on our radar big time a couple of weeks ago, maybe a week ago, when you made an announcement on Twitter and on Facebook that you were retiring. And you can almost get a sense of how important someone is to the football community by when they make some announcement like that, how many other fellow football community members comment on posts. And I saw both on Facebook and Twitter, basically a who's who of everyone I've ever played with, commenting something like amazing career, like she's really proud, like legend, all sorts coming out. And I thought it was a really good, a good display of how much appreciation there is for you in the local game. But you sort of struck me as a guy that would just always keep going. You're kind of lightweight. You seem like you're probably in good shape. You're fit. You could run all day. What was the decision? What made the decision to hang up the boots this year?
Yeah, thank you for that. I mean, I was really blown away and kind of honoured and humbled by how big it actually became. And to hear from so many people in the community was awesome, because I love football in the country. I love the football community, so it was great. You probably touched on the only hard part about it is that I know I could play National League football and physically be perfectly okay. I think I could be one of the best players in the competition for a few more years. And that's probably the only hard part about it. Everything else feels completely right. One of the main reasons is family. I have a nearly 3-year-old kid now and another one on the way in a few months. So there's a bit more of a squeeze on my time. And then probably over the last year, a little bit of enjoyment out of the game was probably extracted a little bit. And not game day. It's all the other little things that come with it. The large amount of training, the travel, especially at National League level. Your weekend's gone, and you're not doing it for the money. That's for sure. So that became a bit of a squeeze on my time on kind of where I put it. And then I'm putting more time into my coaching as well. So it just felt like the right time to do that, to prioritize things a little bit better in my life.
When we talk about getting Aaron Clapham on the show, me and Shay pre-show were discussing probably New Zealand's best domestic player to never play professionally. I don't think too many would argue with that, in terms of getting right on the door and knocking on it and not keep quite getting in. I've got a quote here from Tony Smith in 2015. He says, Aaron's the most talented Canterbury-born player since Ryan Nelsen and consistently one of the best players in the Premiership. At his best, as a creative playmaker, capable of unlocking opposition defences. It's a travesty that erstwhile All-White never got a chance with the Wellington Phoenix, and he should still get a shot at a professional career somewhere. That was 5 years ago. But talk to us about how close you did come, the experiences with the Phoenix, and why, because in my opinion, you were good enough to be a professional footballer. Why it never quite happened?
Oh, that's nice to hear. The answer is I don't know. It's something that I've been asked a number of times, and I've probably asked myself a number of times why that hasn't happened, and I don't have a great answer. Part of it is the footballing landscape. If you have a New Zealand passport, you've got one professional team. To make it in a different country, you've got to be better than a local player significantly in most countries. And the level that you can go into wasn't that interesting to me. I was never interested in being a journeyman. I was never interested in going and playing in the second division of Thailand or something like that. Things that I could have done and been a professional player, and made probably okay money. those things weren't that interesting to me. I wanted to play for the Phoenix. I wanted to play in the A-League. That was really interesting to me. The times where I was probably at my peak, there was one person in charge who, for whatever reason, it didn't quite work out. Why that is, I probably can't really answer that. I can give you my best guess. I think a big part of that is probably I'm not the type of player that ever suited the style of play that was around at that time. I wasn't the type of midfielder that was at the Phoenix or even, frankly, at the All Whites as well. I wasn't that type of player. I'm probably, in terms of my attributes that are the positive side of my game, I'd probably be more suited to being a 23-year-old today because the game's evolved a little bit. And I think I'd probably have more doors opened if I was 10 years younger and of the same ability at that age.
I feel like you came super, super close every time. Because if we go back to 2009 in the Victorian Premier League, is it? I'm going to get this. I'm going to butcher this name, and normally it's Stephen's job to butcher names. But Dandenong Thunder, Dandenong,
Dandenong.
Yeah, Dandenong. So you've played I think you won the Victorian Premier League, and that was around the time the Melbourne Heart was starting up, the second A-League team out of in Victoria. How close or how aligned were they back then?
I've come close so many times. There's so many, near misses that I've forgotten some of them. There's been that many. I went to Dandenong. I actually struggled a little bit to break into the team, even though I was definitely good enough to be in the team regularly. They were just winning. They didn't lose a game all year. I came in kind of halfway through the season, and they hadn't lost a bloody game. So there wasn't, I'd train well, I'd come on and do well. And the coach was kind of like, mate, I can't drop player X because we just won 3-0 on the weekend. The only game we actually lost was the grand final. We lost on penalties. We drew, so we didn't lose a game all year, and then we lost the grand final. But there was certainly some interest around that time. The Melbourne Heart were coming in. Our coach was kind of closely connected with a couple of people there and a couple of people at Perth Glory as well. But it's, again, as a New Zealander, you count as a visa player over there. So you've got to be really good, or you've got to get the right opportunity at the right time. Maybe that's showing up at a club when the club don't quite have the budget to bring in a big name European player or a South American player, and then they might take a chance on a Kiwi. But I probably wasn't quite playing at enough of a level. I played in that grand final. There was an injury, so I started that game, but I played as a right back because there was an injury there. So again, not ideal to be doing that when people are kind of coming to watch as well. Then I nearly went back over kind of January-ish the next year, but that was about the same time as I was starting to get into contention for the All Whites, and obviously the All Whites had already qualified for the World Cup at that point. So I looked at it and thought, if I'm the best player in the National League, in that November, in that last game against Bahrain, which I wasn't involved in, there was a couple of domestic-based players involved in that. So I looked at it and said, look, if I'm the absolute best player in the National League, I kind of can't be ignored. Like, I'm in with a hell of a chance to go to a World Cup. So I kind of put a lot of those things at that stage off to give myself the best opportunity to play for my country at that time.
Were there times when perhaps a professional career was on the table, like you said, in lower divisions, that you chose not to pursue it for sort of relationship or family reasons, or the sort of the safety and comfort of Canterbury? Yeah,
definitely. And depending on the time, like my wife and I joke about it a little bit now, where we'd have, once we were actually together, we had the conversations, like an agent might message you and go, hey, there's an opportunity in country X, the money's Y, and you kind of have this conversation and debate around, like, does that money mean I'm willing to go away for 6 months without you coming, or does that mean I'm willing to do it and live in a shitty country? Or some of them as well, they're like, it's an amazing country, a beautiful place to live, and the money's poor, and you kind of go, all right, maybe we do that. A lot of the times, it was a no, and some of the times it was a yes, and then it didn't eventuate for whatever reason. It's a harsh world, the world of professional football, so it just didn't eventuate because of that. or maybe some other reasons. You don't know. When I was younger, I was probably more willing to make those moves when I was single. But then at the same time, I was always really conscious of wanting to represent my country and wanting to play for New Zealand. So you kind of have to weigh up as well, if I go and play in a lower league somewhere and get my foot in the door, does that take me out of the national team contention? And sometimes you don't know. So yeah.
My money is on you coming back from retirement. You're too fit. You're in too good a nick. I've seen it too many times. You retire for a couple of years, the kids will get to about 2 or 3 and you're back. 37, 38, and you're back pulling the strings at the middle of sort of defensive midfield. So I'm not ready to retire yet, but I do want you to reflect on your career. We've talked about some near misses, but it's not taking away from the incredible domestic career you've had, especially with Canterbury, a legend. Do you think you fulfilled your potential? How do you think back on your career?
Yes and no. What I do know is that I maximized what I could do. So I know 100% that every time I played, I gave it my all. I know that I trained way more than a National League player would because I knew I was competing with professional players to be in the national team setups. So I know without a doubt that in terms of the things that I could control, I took advantage of those and I put a lot of work in. Do I think I became the best player that I absolutely could be? No, because I think if the door had have opened up at 21, 22, 23, and I was in a stronger professional environment, I would have been more challenged more regularly. And I think I would have become a better player through that kind of external challenging that would have occurred because of that.
Let's go to 2011. I think this may be the closest that you got to playing professionally was when you and Sean Lovemore were called into the Wellington Phoenix. I think for a game against Sydney, February 2011. Depleted squad. You were named on the card, but you didn't get off the pitch. My kind of hazy recollection is there's like an eligibility or you wouldn't have been able to go back to Canterbury. Am I way off the mark in my recollection or is that kind of accurate?
I think there's some rules around if you make a professional appearance, you have to sit out to rejoin an amateur competition, which the New Zealand Premiership is. But I don't think that impacted the selection. I don't think Ricky was considering my well-being and my future by not picking me. So I don't think that came into consideration. I would have loved to have got on. I look back on that and I think I wish I was a bit more assertive, because they just called and said, hey, can you come over to Sydney and you'll be on the bench and you might get a run. And I was like, yeah, let's do it. I look back on it now and I wish I had have just said no, unless you're going to give me a proper opportunity. I wish I should have just said no, give me a month. And, I'll prove that I'm good enough. Because I went in there and I went into the training, the training environment, and I felt comfortable. I felt good. And then I was kind of sitting on the bench and they brought on a foreigner off the bench. I think he was Argentinian. He was so bad. When there's an average footballer and you're like, man, I'm never getting a chance if he's getting on before me here.
I'll just jump in here. And I've had this conversation with Sam Wilkinson, friend of the show. So there's no relegation in the A-League. And Wellington is a New Zealand-based club. And for years, there seems to have been kind of this fascination or this kind of desire to sign foreign players or Australian State League players ahead of New Zealand players. Now, again, like I just said, there's no threat of relegation. There's no kind of issue. I kind of feel like how frustrating is that as someone knocking on the door to see those sorts of signings being made and just being like, what the fuck is going on here?
Oh, look, it's ridiculous. It's and part of it actually is like a wider football community problem. I think we're actually disrespectful to our national league. The amount of people I hear saying how average it is like, it's actually a joke. And it's an amateur competition that regularly produces or helps to develop professional players. Like over the last couple of years, there's been a dozen of professional players that have gone out and done well. It's crazy to me that more players aren't getting an opportunity. And if you look at the players that have been given a chance at the Phoenix, that have been players that have been doing really well at the National League level, it's actually a decent success rate. It's actually a good chunk of them have gone on and done fairly well. And I think if you took a few more chances, like there's young guys in the National League now that would do a good job at the Phoenix.
Aaron, I asked one of your former coaches who perhaps knows you the best, Keith Braithwaite, about you and what made you a good player. And he said that he listed a lot of things, but he said the thing that stood out the most was your vision, and you're always 2 steps ahead. You kind of knew what was coming and knew what to do before anyone else. How do you develop something like that? Or do you agree that that was the strength of your game? And how do you develop a skill like that?
Yeah, I do agree. I think part of it is I've always had this kind of analytical mindset, and I've always looked at the game as a coach. I've always assessed tactics really quickly early on in a game. You know, I understand what the other team are doing and then what we're doing, and then because of that, I can kind of think ahead about where the space and where that opens up. So I make decisions really early because of that, I think. I'm scanning all the time. So, you know, we teach young players, you know, always be looking around to see where the space is. So that's something I'm always doing as a player. And then part of it as well is that I've spent hours developing my technique, so I trust it. So I'm not, when the ball's coming into me, I'm not thinking about controlling the ball. I'm thinking about where the space is, where the pressure's coming from, what are my teammates doing, and trying to assess things like that.
Okay, I want to go to 2005 now. You go to the American college system, and I know you get the old next step drink bottle out there.
Hey!
Because
Right on time.
I know that the American pathway is something that you are incredibly passionate and supportive of. How did your journey start? Because when you went over, I think I'd been over there a few years, and before me it was sort of Tony Lockhead and Andy Boyens, and before him Ryan Nelsen, Simon Elliott. So you were kind of that third tier almost. How did that?
Third wave.
Third wave.
Say
third wave.
Tier. Shit.
What was your contact there? And did you have to, like me, get a video on VHS and send it across the world and hope someone took a liking to it?
Yeah. I knew of, you know, Ryan Nelsen's a legend in Christchurch, so I knew that was kind of the pathway he went down. Tim Brown's the other one as well. So kind of I'd seen that people had gone over and done really well. My sister actually went over 2 years before me. She's 2 years older than me. So she had gone down that pathway, and she went through that process of the same as you, kind of getting a ladder out and trying to film a game and converting it and sending it away and it not working and then kind of coming back. But I got very lucky. A couple of contacts. So Steve Fleming, who's a guy in Dunedin, John Brown helped a little bit. Peter Phelan, a couple of really good football guys got me in touch with Bobby Clark. Bobby Clark was an All Whites coach in the 90s, and then he went over to America and became a bit of a legend in the American college game. Stanford, he had Ryan Nelsen at Stanford. And then he was at Notre Dame, which is a kind of big historic school. So they were the school that recruited me, Notre Dame. Massively expensive school though. They offered me about 60-70% of a scholarship, which still left like $20,000 a year. My family were like, I didn't grow up with money, so my family were just like, that's not an option whatsoever. And we said, do you know anyone else that will give us more money? And that's how I got in touch with BJ Craig at St. Francis. And he did not see me play. I did not know anything about the school. I just knew that it was an American college. So I went over completely like sight unseen and flew over to the middle of nowhere in Pennsylvania and spent my first 2 years there. I actually remember, Steve, that one of my first days there, they go, oh, we play in the same conference as Monmouth and they've got a Kiwi. And I was like, awesome, yes, we're going to become buddies. I don't know if you remember that, but like one of my first games was at Monmouth. It was not my first games, but kind of in that first season. And you guys were on a hell of a run. You guys were tearing it up, and we played at your place, and we were doing quite well. And I think we were actually 1-0 up. This is how I remember. We were 1-0 up, and we were kind of defending for our lives. We were massive underdogs in that game, and we won a free kick. You won a free kick, on the edge of our 18-yard box. And in America, they do the countdown timer, so it starts at 9.
I didn't remember that was against you. That's one of the.
I'm pumping you up big time here, Steve.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Don't do this.
This is a massive pump up, Seamus. You'll love it. So I look up at the clock and there's about 10 seconds left, and I'm like an absolute genius. I'll just kick the ball away, and obviously you won't get the ball back in time, and it'll go to 0 and we'll win the game. I kick the ball away, and then that's a yellow card offence, and that stops the clock. So the time is I kicked the ball away. Whereas if I'd have done nothing, they would have obviously had to scramble and quickly take a free kick. It probably would have turned to shit. And had time to reset. So everything stopped. I'm like, oh man, I'm an idiot. Sorry guys, I didn't know. And do you want to take it from here, Steve? Do you remember what happened from there?
It's your episode, Clash. Why are you giving him the spotlight anyway?
Oh, because it's his moment. This is his moment.
Like 0.6 seconds on the big sort of scoreboard. So everyone knew it was the last kick of the game. And I've just clipped it over the wall and huge celebrations. I think it ended 1-0. I don't think we won it in overtime. But I do tell that story from time to time. I forgot it was against your team, but it's a great memory.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you for sharing it.
Yeah, you're welcome. That was all my doing because I thought I was being a hero.
Yeah. So Aaron, we had Ross McKenzie on a couple of weeks ago, Stephen's brother-in-law, who unsuccessfully went to the MLS Combine and subsequent draft. You also had a Combine experience. What was yours like in comparison? Well, hopefully it was much better than Ross's was, but what was your MLS Combine experience?
It kind of got worse, it's funny as well, like the connections that have kind of come through there. My roommate in college, Brian Murphy, was actually lived in Akron, and his brother played at Akron with Ross. So I actually went and watched them play because St. Francis never made the national tournament, so we were ready to go home. I went to his place for a break, and Akron were playing, and I actually saw Ross score in a national tournament game, which is crazy. So my MLS Combine, so I went to St. Francis, then I transferred to Louisville, University of Louisville, which is a bigger school, just a bit more of a challenge. And I had a couple of great years there. It went really well. And then, got invited to the MLS Combine. I look back on it now, and I really let an opportunity go. I mean, not as badly as Ross did, but
I don't think anybody did.
But I certainly let it go a little bit. And the MLS Combine is tough, man. Like your season finishes we finished in late November. The MLS Combine's in mid-January, and there's nothing that happens in between then. I stayed in Louisville, which is probably a mistake. It was snowing. I couldn't really get out on the pitch and train. I was going for runs, and that's about it. But I hadn't really touched a ball much. You go down to Florida for the camp, and you kind of meet your teammates, and then you play the next day. So I didn't really prepare myself as best I could, and then the way I play as well, I like to combine. I like to build relationships with players. It's really difficult to do in that kind of environment. So I didn't play that well. To be honest. And you've kind of got to reflect on that and go, I let an opportunity slip there a little bit. I had an agent at the time, and there was a few teams that were really interested. I thought I'd go quite late in the draft. But going late in the draft it doesn't mean anything. You either go on the first 10 picks and you get a kind of guaranteed decent contract, and anything below that is poor financially, but then poor security as well. Basically, they can just release you at any point. So undrafted. Then I had a couple of teams wanted me to come in at that point for preseason. Again, on a non-guaranteed contract, go on trial, basically. I chose not to do it. The main reasons were the amount of people that actually do that and get a contract is massively slim. It's fuck all of them. And I hadn't graduated. That was the other thing kind of stopping me from doing it. I was going to graduate in May, so I still had another 3 months of school left. So I decided to stay in school just because the chances of actually dropping out and going into preseason and getting a contract are really, really slim. It doesn't happen very often at all. My MLS Combine experience, it was a good experience and something I learned from, but I probably look back on and go, I should have prepared better for that. There's more I could have done and taken control of.
Definitely a common theme with our guests and combines. Maybe we'll get someone who's had a successful one at some point. Tony Lockhead or someone like that.
Francis de Vries had a good one. He got drafted.
Let's stay on that because like you're part of a bit of a golden generation of players out of the top of the South Island. Yourself, Jeremy Brockie, Michael White, Jack Pelter. I didn't realise this until I did some research on you, that you do have Next Step, which helps players on the US college pathway. Roughly how many players out of kind of the Canterbury, South Island region do you think you've helped? Because I, again, being involved with national youth teams, used to kind of do a bit of trawling, and like there was a huge number of players that were going out of that had played mainland Premier League and that were all in the States. And I kind of thought, how does this happen? And now I kind of put two and two together and realised it must have been a lot to do with you. Like Seth Clark is probably the latest one that I'm aware of that's gone. It's top player. So are you pushing all of those out of that region, men and women?
Yeah, every talented player's got to get out. No, and like I am, I love the American college system. I think there's so many benefits to it, but I don't push it on anyone. You know, if especially if you're someone who's got a chance of being a professional, I think that you should really pursue that with everything you've got. But the reality is that's such a small percentage of people that have a chance of getting even close to that. So, you know, Stephen's gone through it, but I loved it. I absolutely loved it. You know, the opportunity to be in a really professional football environment, you know, great facilities, you know, decent coaches, playing with really good players, challenging yourself all the time. But, you know, now for myself, as I get a bit older, that life experience of traveling to the other side of the world, but doing it in quite a safe way as well. And then to get a degree behind you that's paid for, there's nothing like it. There's nothing like it. And we don't have any system or setup in New Zealand at the moment that can really compete with that. So, you know, if someone comes to me and asks for my advice, you know, I'm pretty quick to say, look, it was an amazing experience for me, and you know, the other 20, 30 people that I've helped get over there recently too.
My last one before we kind of leave this topic is, there again, being involved with New Zealand football and youth teams, there's a perception that the South Island is underrepresented in terms of national teams. You are probably one of, well, there's not been too many along the lines. And do you put that down to a little bit of out of sight, out of mind, or what do you kind of attribute that to?
There's two parts to it. You know, you can't just deflect responsibility. You know, we as a region need to continue to develop more better players. So that, you have to incorporate that into it. But the reality is, for a young South Island-based player, you have to be better than someone in the North Island, and you have to prove it in a very small window. You know, if you're Auckland-based and your coach is Auckland-based, you're going to be in a training group where the coach sees you all the time. He builds trust. He builds a relationship. If you're a South Island-based player, you come in for a camp for 3 days, and you either perform or you don't. You don't get the opportunity to truly show where you are. And if it's close, the coach is always going to go with the person that they've seen regularly, because they trust that person. They've built a relationship with them. They know exactly what they're going to get, whereas there's some risk with the other kid. So the reality is, if you're from a smaller market, or you're from the South Island, then unfortunately at the moment you've got to prove that in that way. It's getting better, I hope, with the opportunity for filming of games. You know, you can jump on Huddle, Instat, Y-Scout, whatever, and you can find a lot of games. So players have the chance to be seen a lot more than they used to be able to. But that's part of it. You know, it's confirmation bias.
Aaron, let's jump across to 2009. You're watching the Bahrain playoff game on TV, from what I understand. And then 2010, you're sort of all over the news cycle. I remember for a week it was Aaron Clapham, the bolter, and it was like the big story. When you're watching those games against Bahrain, was there a part, Bahrain? Was there a part of you that thought, I'm going to make that squad, or did it come as a surprise to you as well?
Not at that point. I was just a fan. I was watching it with my mates, having a couple of beers, and really enjoyed it. Probably in late December, kind of early January. I have it's actually one of the most prized possessions that I have. It's a small little piece of paper that has a couple of goals on it. But I kind of got to the point where I was like, why not me? Like I looked at that, like I said before, I looked at that and players in the National League that are in that squad. Why can't that be me? So I wrote down a goal on a piece of paper that I'd be an all-white. I wrote down that I'd go to the World Cup, and I wrote down that I'd be a professional footballer, all in that year. So 2 out of 3 of those things happened, which we've talked to death already, the other one. But the all-white one, so I wrote it down, and I like just fully committed myself to being the best I could be. I looked at it and said, if Canterbury United are in the top 4 and I'm, if we're making the playoffs and if I'm one of the best players in the National League, I've got to get an opportunity. I don't see how I can be ignored. I've got to at least get into a camp, and then from there, we'll see what happens. So at the point of kind of watching those games, no. But shortly after, once I looked at it and saw the squad had a couple of National League players in there, I was like, why the hell can't that be me?
When you do get into those camps as a National League player, is the step up noticeable with players that are in the full-time environments, or are you just that goes out the window and you're just doing your absolute best at the time?
It's part of that is difficult to answer without sounding egotistical, but I'm going to do it anyway. I think that some of my attributes that we talked about already, that vision, that awareness, my technique, I think that those attributes step up better than some of the other attributes do up into a higher level. So because I was able to kind of perceive space and pressure and tactical things, that allowed me to make an adjustment up to a higher level easier than maybe some other players. So I think that helped, but without a doubt, it's certainly, there's good players in the national team. Back then, there were still very good players in the national team. So it's everything's happening at a quicker pace. You've got to make decisions quicker. So it's certainly not easy, and it's certainly a noticeable difference, but I feel like I had attributes that helped me to make that adjustment.
So how did Ricky, I'm assuming it was Ricky, actually break the news to you that you were in the squad for the World Cup? And then what do you do after you get that phone call? Or
I know the exact story because I read it last night, but I'll let Aaron tell it.
Oh, thanks, Shay.
Good input, Shay. Yes, though they look, the amount of conversations I've ever had with Ricky are very minimal. So no, he didn't break it to me. I was in the hotel lobby. And I think it was after a meal, and the manager kind of grabbed me and dragged me into an elevator, which is obviously a bit disconcerting. But he basically said, look, I needed a private moment. I need you to go and get the physicals done. You're going to be at the press conference tonight. You're going to the World Cup. So it was the team manager that kind of broke it to me. And yeah, he was like, I can't tell anyone though. You've got to go grab your gear and quickly get off to do your last few medicals. So yeah, it was the team manager, and it was crazy. It was the most it was unbelievably exciting, something that you worked that hard to try and achieve. It was a pretty special moment.
You've referenced Ryan Nelsen already earlier in the podcast. Was that your first interaction with him in a team environment, or had you come across him in Christchurch growing up?
No, he wasn't even in that camp. He wasn't even there. So I actually didn't meet Nelly in person until, on the tour, on the way there. I think maybe even Europe we might have met him, or maybe he came to Australia. We met him there. So that was my first time I met him in person. But he's obviously, a hero in Christchurch, rightly so. Amazing career, amazing guy. But I'd reached out to him a couple of times before then. When I was in America, I managed to get a hold of his email through Bobby Clark, who coached him. And I reached out to him and just said, hey, I'm from Christchurch. I'm in America, kind of, any advice, help me out kind of thing, like one of those naive messages. But such a great guy, he actually got back to me. I was no one. He actually got back and just said, hey, good stuff. Keep working hard. Well done. And it meant a hell of a lot to me. It was pretty amazing. But yeah, I didn't meet him until, quite a bit later on.
Sounds like you've had more success than the Between Two Beers team. We've been trying to get Ryan Nelsen on the podcast, but Shay's LinkedIn messages seem to be ignored at the moment. So I don't know if you're still in contact with him, but maybe you could flick him a little message and say, yeah. I saw he was on the We Are Canterbury Facebook page a month ago. One of their
Yeah,
videos.
they must have more ball than you guys.
Parochial down there, Steve. Parochial. This is a coup for us to get a genuine dyed-in-the-wool can tab on.
Do you have any Ryan Nelsen stories? We've heard some of the guests sort of saying, he was a cut above at the training sessions. The defenders, you learned so much from him. Was there anything in particular that you picked up from him in camp?
Yeah, there's one that always stands out between him and Simon Elliott. From before that World Cup, we were in Austria, somewhere in Austria, in the mountains of Austria, doing like a little camp. And we had a training session, and then we basically had about 45 minutes free time. And it was kind of like, hey, players, like as part of the training, go into the gym, whatever. And pretty much everyone just went and pissed about and, pretended to stretch and had a laugh and chatted shit. And I looked over and I saw Ryan Nelsen and Simon Elliott just absolutely going at it, like properly putting a shift in. So you've got like 95% of the team over here pretending to stretch, piss about, and you've got two guys who are the guys that have had the best careers, who are the most caps, the real senior players, absolutely putting a shift in the gym. And like that really resonated with me. Like they didn't say anything. It was from what they were doing. And I just thought, man, like that's why those players have had the careers that they've had.
That obviously stuck with you. I think I read that, even last year or two, that you're always sort of the fittest at the training sessions. What is that? Is that you're doing extra fitness work away from teams, or you're naturally fit, or is it those sort of principles you sort of took from Simon and Ryan to just work harder than everyone else?
Yeah, that really, like that kind of thing really resonates with me, just seeing that in action. I have this thing where I often think about my future, like without being too like depressing about it, but I often think about, what do you think about on your deathbed? What do you think about when you're 70? What are the things that you regret doing with your time? And there's no one that regrets working hard or being the best they can, but lots of people regret, knowing deep down inside that they didn't give their all in an opportunity. So when I play and when I train, I want to give it my all so I can look back and know that I maximize that. I'm also massively competitive. So when we run a beep test, I want to beat those 19-year-old kids. I can't help it. And, you wear GPS units these days. So, I want to, at the end of it, go, look, I ran 12.8 Ks in that game. So you're not taking my spot kind of thing. I can't help it. I've got that real competitive streak in me that I'm a little bit crazy. I've got to kind of pursue something. I've really got to try and get after it and try and win. When I don't do that and when I don't have something like that in my life, that's when I'm kind of a bit down and not too fun to be around.
So now that you've retired until you come back, like we spoke about in a couple of years, what are you going to climb into? What are you going to use all that energy on?
I don't know. But like over the COVID break, I ran like a stupid amount of kilometers. I did like a half marathon for no reason. I've got to do something. I've got to take action. So yeah, I'm very conscious of that part of my psyche and my need to fill it with something, but I don't have a great answer just yet.
Yeah. Heading back to Canterbury, one of the other things Keith said is that Aaron, when I think of Aaron Clapham, I think someone who's incredibly loyal to Canterbury, proud of Christchurch. And he talked about the number of times and opportunities that other teams or clubs came in for you. I don't know if he meant other National League franchises or other clubs, but for whatever reason, you often prioritised staying, supporting Canterbury for a lot less money and a lot less recognition than going on these things. How close did you ever come to joining Auckland City, for example?
Yeah, I love Keith. He's brilliant. He's a top guy. Without him, I might not have made the All Whites. I might have gone back to Melbourne. He chased Ricky down basically and got me in for like trials at the Phoenix and things like that. Like he was brilliant. So I owe him a lot. How close did I get to going? During those early years, it was every season. I'm sure you can name the 3 teams that would be enticing. They came in pretty much every time for a couple of years there. Did I get close a couple of times? Like the Club World Cup's quite a big pool, so that was always enticing. But there was always kind of other things on the horizon as well. Like I felt like, hey, something might happen in January in the professional environment. So why would I go up to Auckland for 3 months when I can enjoy those last couple of months in Christchurch? Obviously, that never eventuated. And in hindsight, it's easy to go, well, maybe if you went at 23, 24 and you went to Waitakere or you went to Auckland City or you went to Wellington, then that could have happened. But it wasn't, like I said, I wasn't that interested in a journeyman career. I wasn't that interested in playing for lots of clubs. I didn't see, other than the Club World Cup, playing for another National League team, I didn't feel like that was that exciting or that interesting to me at that time. So yeah, I was very loyal. I certainly turned down more money elsewhere very frequently.
You mentioned Keith Braithwaite and how much he meant to you and how much maybe you owe some of your career to him. How did you manage to get the spelling on his name wrong when you brought a shirt back from South Africa for him?
Oh no! Yeah, I might have made a little mistake there. But you can't just rub them out. What do you do? Hand in the shirt? Like, do you just go, oh well, I've got 100 more?
Amazing.
Was it the Keith you got wrong, or the Braithwaite?
I can't even remember. It's that I before E stuff,
Except after C.
I don't think there is an E in Braithwaite. Only at the end.
There's one in Keith.
Oh yeah. Sorry.
Aaron, just staying on Canterbury, I remember there was a year, it might have been when Willie Goodson was there, and you kind of stepped away from the game for a period. Was that a reason because you sort of become disillusioned with the game, or you needed a break, or was there another reason?
There's probably a couple of factors that were involved in there. It was around the birth of my child. I love my family. I love spending time with them. So that was kind of something that was always kind of sitting in the background. But I didn't have a fantastic relationship with Willie. And there were a couple of issues that we had along the way. So those kind of two things combined. I didn't mention any of that at the time when it happened. I just said family because I didn't want anything disparaging for Canterbury United at that time, because I want the club to do well. Even now I'm gone, I want the club to do well. I want them to be great. So yeah, I didn't obviously bring any of that up because I knew he was going to stay on as the coach. But yeah, we didn't really see eye to eye on quite a few things. And then that combined with my desire to be, with my newborn son, put a little bit of pressure on that. Probably without the family situation, I probably would have just stayed and stuck it out and carried on because I'm loyal and I'm professional and things like that. But yeah, with that, it was kind of like, well, why am I coming and doing this when I could be at home with my family? So that was kind of the reason behind that.
Because soon after that, you end up at Team Wellington. Was that linked? Was it kind of after that season, and then you've gone to Team Wellington to go to the Club World Cup with them?
Yeah, there was a pretty big gap in there. So I was only there for a couple of games that season with Canterbury. It must have been maybe October, November when I stepped away. Didn't play at all for that whole season. Played over the winter with Kashmir Tech. I'd even reached out to a couple of people at Canterbury and was like, hey, I'll play at Canterbury. My son's a bit older, we kind of sort of know what we're doing as parents now. So I can probably spare a bit more time. I'd be keen. And then just nothing kind of eventuated from that. And I wasn't going to play. I wasn't planning. I wasn't speaking to anyone really. And then I was away on holiday with my family, and Jose called. New Zealand football had kind of released some squads, and Jose just called and said, look, I've assumed you were playing at Canterbury. You're not playing. I'd love to have you up at Wellington. Do you want to go to a Club World Cup? So that's a pretty nice sales pitch, when I was probably 31, 32 at the time. And you kind of go, bloody hell, that's a nice way to finish things off, maybe, to experience something like that. I'm a big fan of Jose. I love the way he plays football. In terms of like my attributes, I think I fit in really nicely to the way he plays. So, once I'd worked out, how I could possibly make that work while, working and living in Christchurch and having a family. Once we got through those kind of hurdles, I was absolutely keen to do it.
So you go to the Club World Cup, and how do you reflect on that game? What an incredible game! That up 3-0. It was up 3-0, tied 3-3, lose on penalties.
Yeah.
I remember watching that in a pub, and I was just blown away. You scored the opening goal, was it? Second goal? But it was like, Team Wellington, 3-0 up, Club World Cup. This is nuts.
That's what we were thinking too. Yeah.
So reflecting on that now, was that a good performance? Was it a wasted opportunity? Where does that sit with you?
I loved it. I loved the Club World Cup, the whole build up to it. You go into camp, you have a proper preparation. You spend a couple of weeks being as professional as you can. You properly analyze the opposition. I absolutely loved it. And Mario Barcia scored an unbelievable opening goal from like 35 yards out. It was unbelievable. I scored the second, and then we scored a third off a corner, and it was kind of I remember celebrating that third one in the corner, and everyone was just like, what is going on here? Like, what's happening? What the hell is this? And if we get in at halftime at 3-0 up, I think there's no way we lose that. But they scored just before halftime to make it 3-1, and that kind of gave them a little sniff, and it gave them a bit of confidence. And then it was quite an open game. It was quite an open game in the second half. We didn't sit back and defend, really. We kept attacking. And you can look back in hindsight and say you should have done something else, but it wasn't really the character of our team. The team we had was attacking. It was exciting. It was fun. We kept going. They brought a guy off the bench who had just scored at the World Cup before then from Sweden. I can't remember his name, but like that's what they had. That was the quality that they had. Right after that tournament, their Brazilian player signed for like someone in Portugal, Benfica, one of the big teams in Portugal. So they were quality. They were very, very good. They managed to score a couple of goals to bring it back to 3-3, and then unfortunately lost it on penalties.
Does that game sit higher than All White's debut against Honduras in 2010? Where do those two kind of stack up?
Nah, nothing compares to your debut because it means so much. Something that you dream about, something that you don't really think is possible. I sat on the bench for maybe a dozen games before I made my debut, so I even had that thing of, shit, I'm not going to make my debut. Like, it might not happen. So it was it was amazing. And it was pretty special to do that in New Zealand with my family there. The difference was, at the Club World Cup, I started, I scored. To be able to do that on the world stage is pretty amazing, but it doesn't compare to my debut.
You mentioned playing, the debut was in New Zealand. I think you've only played twice in New Zealand out of the 13 appearances for the All Whites. This is maybe a little bit of a raw one, but not having the opportunity to play in Christchurch against Tahiti in 2012. Correct me if I'm wrong. You were injury free. You were available. You could have been selected
very
for that
available. Game. Yeah, so very available. There's probably no game I've ever wanted to be involved in as much as that. I was so disappointed that I missed out on that. It was pretty crushing. Obviously, you can tell from the podcast so far, I love Christchurch. So it's a special place for me, and that would have been amazing. So that was a tough one. That was a really, really tough one to, read in the papers that you're not on the team. It's pretty shit. I didn't really enjoy that one too much. I remember someone on the board or one of the presidents who I'd had like a nice jovial relationship with before. He called me and was like, "Oh mate, I'm really sorry, but I've got some tickets waiting for you, to go watch the game." And I remember just being like, "Fuck off!" I didn't say that, but I was like, "Mate, oh, thank you, I appreciate it," and got off the phone and threw my phone and was like, "What a dickhead! I'm not going to that game."
You didn't go, right? Is that right? Like, there's a story. Yeah,
I couldn't go. I couldn't do it. Like this, I just couldn't bring myself to actually go to watch the game. There's no way. Like even now, like I know I couldn't go. I'd be so angry. Like I'd have so many people talking to me and asking me like, "Hey, why aren't you playing?" I'm like, "Fuck." Man,
did you go to the game in 2006 when the All Whites played Malaysia as a fan? The last time before?
No, I was in America.
Yeah,
so I wasn't there for that. But I would have gone as a fan when I wasn't in the selection frame, no doubt about it. Even now, like I'd go and watch as a fan now, but not after I've not made the team when I felt like I should have.
That is painful. You know those conversations would be every 10 steps. Oh, Aaron.
How come you're not out there, mate? Why don't you fuck off, mate? How about that?
Yeah.
Before we leave the All Whites, and I'm going to tee Stephen up for one of his pet topics here. Correct me if I'm wrong. I believe your last All Whites appearance on the pitch was Port of Spain, Trinidad and Tobago. On that tour before Mexico. Ricky goes as coach after the Mexico matches. Embers is in for a couple of holding matches, and then Anthony Hudson takes over. Do you want to do the questions?
Yeah, doing great, mate. You continue.
Under the Hudson regime, was there any communication or any contact, or just that was that?
Yeah, no, that was it. I was done at that point. I bumped into him randomly at English Park in Christchurch. I think he had come down for like some kind of like breakfast speech thing that I wasn't aware of. And I'd come in to do some coaching. And like we kind of like awkwardly crossed paths and we stopped and had like a horrible chat, just like, oh, hey, like when you know someone and you're like, it's a bit awkward. It was one of those ones where like you want the conversation.
Darren Clapham, is that who you are?
That's what? Yeah, don't you? Yeah. Haven't called me in a while. So yeah, it was one of those awkward ones that you just want to kind of end, and that's the limit of my interaction. So sorry, Stephen, I don't have any inside information on Hudson for you.
That's all right. We can go one episode without getting some Hudson dirt. Clap, you were named in all of the sort of NZFC team of the decades, all that sort of carry on. You were certainly in my team of the decade. When you think back of players that you played with domestically, who stands out as the best?
Played with
or against? Sorry.
Or against. Yeah, I mean, against Roy Krishna from the first time you saw him, it was like, he's too good to be in this league. What's going on there? That one was a no-brainer. I've played with lots of really good players in Canterbury's teams over the years. My favourites were in the early years. Russell Carmo and Tom Lancaster. They were great to play with, but great mates as well.
Talk us through a night at Boogie Nights with those two.
Boogie Nights, what a place! Oh, we had some good times. We used to go to training and then kind of like early on in the session go, Boogie Nights tonight? And nah, we've got a game on the weekend. And then like halfway through, Boogie Nights? Nah, oh man. And then post training, I'll be like, all right, yeah, I'll see you there at 10. So we had some absolutely brilliant nights there. Tom Lancaster used to know one of the lads behind the bar, so we'd go up to the bar, and he'd always insist that we paid with our card, not with cash, so it wasn't quite as transferable. And he not to all legitimate, of course. He'd supply some nice discounts on the price for our loyalty. We were there every Thursday, so a loyalty discount. And yeah, we'd get bloody trays full of vodka oranges and have a great time.
You had the dream 100th game for Canterbury. Scored a hat-trick. We were in contact with Andre de Jong in the lead up to this podcast, and he feels very, very responsible for that dream day, earning 2 of those penalties. Any kind of that goal scoring record that you've got, it's kind of on par like New Zealand's Frank Lampard. You scored a shit ton of goals from midfield. What do you put that down to?
Yeah, Dre, especially the third goal on that day. Dre with a horrific dive. Somehow the ref has awarded a penalty when the game's already over as well. We're already up by like 3-0, I think, and he's dived and won a penalty. Cheers, Dre. What do I put it down to? Set pieces is a part of it. I take penalties, I take free kicks. So a decent chunk of those goals comes from penalties and free kicks. But I love scoring goals. I make a lot of runs into the box that a lot of people wouldn't. And you keep doing that, eventually you get rewarded. But I've always wanted to score. I love scoring goals. So I've worked hard on my finishing. I've always wanted to in my early years, I always wanted to stick around late and work on my finishing to make sure I was mastering that. But I think a lot of it, set pieces help. But I have a real hunger and a desire to make those runs into the box that maybe some other people wouldn't or aren't willing to do, or maybe they don't see. But I've always been willing to make those runs to get those easy goals.
That's a skill, isn't it? Reading of the game that we sort of talked about, knowing what gambles to take and what area of the box you should run to because the ball is likely to break there. I think it's a really sort of underrated skill, which top goal scorers have in abundance. Claps, one of the common themes that we got from people when talking about you was that you're constantly on a journey of sort of improving and learning. And I know me and Shay, I don't know if that's that sort of age we're at, the sort of mid-30s where you're looking at ways of optimizing your life. We've talked about on the show sort of cold showers and the different diets we're trying, and for me it's breathing. Are there things for you that you've adopted maybe over the last few years that have really helped sort of optimize what you do in your life?
Yeah, I've dabbled in a little bit of everything. I've tried a number of different things. Some of them I enjoy, so I keep doing. But I'm willing to experiment, and I'm always trying to improve. I'm always trying to get better. I'm always trying to learn new things. It's part of kind of my makeup a little bit. It's a little bit of that craziness I was talking about, where I kind of have to keep trying to learn something new. And when I'm doing something and I get to the point of maybe not mastery, but that point where the improvement's not quite there, that's when I generally move on to something else and get interested in something else. But yeah, I've done the same. I've dabbled in some meditation, some yoga. Both of those have been really helpful for physical and mental performance. I've done ice baths, done cold showers. I still do them a little bit. I've tried the Wim Hof breathing. I like it. I prefer. I find it a bit intense, kind of the intensity of that breathing. I actually like the breathing side of it to help calm down. So I prefer some other areas of that. Diet. I'm always trying different new things. I've experimented with some fasting, which I like as well. I'm open to any other suggestions that you guys have too. I'm always trying to learn and do new things. Those spiced rums helping.
They are, yeah. We need to get a health and wellness guru on. I feel like a lot of our audience is on this journey with us. The amount of people who have reached out and said, I need to know more about this Wim Hof breathing. I feel like I'm the sort of Wim Hof practitioner.
Yeah. Let's talk family for a little bit. So you come from a football family. I think your mum played for Canterbury. Your dad coached Canterbury women, and your sister played 3 times for the Football Ferns as well. Football's always been in and around the household, like from a young age.
Yeah, but I mean, it sounds a bit more glamorous than it is. Like my parents were mostly involved in the community space. So a very small club here in Christchurch, Burwood AFC. My uncle's actually still the president there, which is cool. But it's just always, that's what we did on the weekends, is I kind of lingered around the ground, kicked around with the older kids, kicked the ball against the wall while the games were going in, tried to compete with the older players. I've just been around it forever. And my sister gets no credit, but she was a very, very good player. She played for the Canterbury senior women's team at 12 or 13, very young. Played for New Zealand in her teenage years as well. Women's national knockout final while she was still in high school. She scored a hat-trick and won the player of that final. So because she was 2 years older than me as well, we were kind of evenly matched for quite a few years in those kind of early teenage years. So we spent a lot of time in the backyard playing soccer, tennis, kicking a ball back and forward, playing 1v1. And that probably, shaped a lot of, the player that I became. Unfortunately, she had some pretty serious knee injuries, did her ACL 3 times. So she retired very young, but she was a really good player and doesn't get enough credit. But yeah, my family, obviously that introduction to the sport and just having it always around was part of why I fell in love with the game.
And this isn't meant disrespectfully, but a little bit of an unfashionable high school in Aranui. Now, I remember growing up, Aranui was like a factory for rugby league and rugby. As a footballer that went to that school, what was that like? Did you have a first 11, or was all your football experiences through club?
Yeah, I grew up. Aranui is the hood of Christchurch. I've travelled all around the world, so I know what proper hoods look like, and it's not that bad. But as far as Christchurch goes, I grew up in the Christchurch hood. And Aranui is not a glamorous area. It's a largely Māori and Pacific Island community, lower socioeconomic area. And because of that, rugby league are the predominant sports. So no, I didn't have any high school involvement in football. But that was actually a good thing. It was my kind of break from it, because outside of that, that's pretty much all I was doing. So it was quite nice to go to school and, play basketball instead of football all the time.
Is my memory right in that there was like a sports academy down there, though, out of Haranui High School for a little while?
Yeah, it was basically keeping the kids in school a bit longer, having a sports academy there. So it was really popular, the rugby, and then in the later years while I was there, the rugby league became even more popular. The rugby league academy, they had a basketball academy set up. There wasn't a football academy there, though, that's for sure.
One of my sources tells me that there's a crew of your old friends from Aranui who like to get down and support the Canterbury games. And they were sort of welcomed, given beers by the club, and they created quite a vocal supporting group. And when we had Neil Emblem on the podcast, he talked about how much he struggled with some of not struggled, but he definitely mentioned how much he noticed a lot of the abuse and the sort of catcalls from the crowd that he got. Was that your group of Aranui friends responsible for that?
So I want to be very clear here. My lovely high school friends, we were basically like the outcast, nerdy white kids from school, so we stuck together. But they are not that group that he's referring to. There's 2 or 3 older gentlemen that I believe at times take things a little bit too far. I'm not immune to the insults from them as well. My friends are slightly over a bit, so that those 2 or 3 hang out right behind the dugout. My friends are a little bit outside. They're certainly parochial. They will certainly pick someone out from the opposition to have a bit of a laugh with. Poor Chad Coombs actually used to take a beating from them. They really enjoyed Chad coming down and gave him a lot of stick. Poor guy.
One of our other sources said that you're extremely proud of your wedding that you hosted at the family house. Can you share any light on that?
It was a nice day. I had a good little family wedding at my house.
Oh, that's good.
Where have you seen photos?
Facebook, man. That's all
over
over that place.
No, you guys are on there.
All right, that fell flat. Let's talk about something that I have no experience in that you two can talk about, which is having your kids come and watch you play football now. So Stephen, if you're not aware, is going through something of a renaissance and is back in the Melville first team this season. And wow. I witnessed on the weekend his firstborn, Bowie, came down and watched. And I wondered what that experience is like as a father, seeing your young or having your young son come to watch you. I never had that. My dad was retired from his sporting years when I was old enough to kind of remember. But for you two, what's that like? Because Aaron, you mentioned that was part of the reason why you went back to Canterbury for the season just finished, was it was an opportunity for Emerson, I think, to come and watch you play at home. So what's that like for I guess it's a question for both of you to have that experience?
I'll Well, yeah, Bowie hasn't really seen me play because I've been injured for the last 3 years. So perhaps his first experience was on Saturday. I played 30 minutes off the bench for Melville against Wanderers. And I was kind of just focused on not embarrassing myself, really. I wasn't thinking about...
Was that in front of him or was that in front of us?
And especially when I tripped over the ball with my first touch, I was just totally tuned in to not making a dick of myself. No, but it is something which is pretty cool. And I'm looking forward to hopefully featuring in some games this season and letting him, because I know he goes along and he sees Dad playing, and yeah, it's kind of a cool little scene. Aaron?
Yeah, I loved it. I've got a couple of special like photos that are really special to me. Just having a little play and a cuddle after the game, which will be something that I cherish forever, and I'm really glad I did it just for even those moments. And I thought that he was like super excited about coming down to watch me play, because he'd always be like, "Yeah, Daddy's got football, Daddy football today," and it turns out he was really excited about the sausage sizzle.
Good sausages down there.
Yeah.
Let's jump around to 2011. So we talked about sort of the Phoenix didn't quite work, and you bounced back to Canterbury. And I understand quite soon after that was the Christchurch earthquakes. Where were you when that happened? And talk about the effect that had on you and your family and friends and all those around you.
Yeah, it's something that, like, when you asked me about being loyal before as well, I think that probably had a really big impact on that too. I think that when you go through something like that, it creates a sense of community. I remember talking to my neighbor for the first time after that. Like I'd lived there for like a year and I hadn't talked to my neighbor, but you went and checked on them because you felt connected to people after going through something like that. So yeah, I was out for a run in the forest with my dad's dog. So we were in the Burwood Forest. I lived just up the road from there. Yeah, so I was out for a run. I remember like the trees, just kind of like massive trees there, like huge, like 40 feet high. Like you can't put your arms around the massive trees through this forest. And I remember them just going like on a 45-degree angle to the side, and just, I don't know, like I was the only one out there. It was just me and the dog. And I don't remember ever like thinking, oh shit, I'm going to die or anything like that. But I had this weird feeling that like I was going to get stuck there. I was like, man, like my first thought was like, how is someone going to find me? Like no one knew I was out for a run. I'm in the middle of a forest. And then like, I ended up like hanging on to a tree basically, which isn't probably that smart because the tree is at a 45-degree angle. So yeah, and then I just quickly ran probably quite a lot faster out of the forest, and then jumped in the car and went back to my place. And then on that road back, the roads are dug up, the roads are broken, there's massive holes. Went back into the house, everything had fallen off. TVs, shelves, everything had moved. Everything from the cupboards was smashed. There was stuff everywhere. And yeah, you're trying to check in with people, but obviously in those moments, everyone's trying to do the same thing, so that the phone service gets overloaded. So you go. It was a couple of hours before I got through to my dad, through to my mum, friends, all of those things. You don't know how anyone's doing, and obviously you think, shit, if it's this bad here, what if it's worse there? What's going on? So it was pretty crazy. I think from that as well, a lot of people forget how traumatic the aftershocks were too, and whether people from outside the region probably don't understand, but like there were literally thousands of aftershocks, and every single earthquake or aftershock starts the same way. It all starts with that first initial little rumble where you kind of don't know what's happening. So it just like re-triggers that same kind of fear response. Like you think it's the worst thing that can possibly happen. You think oh shit, is this another big one? There's a really quite psychologically scarring thing. But I think the flip side of that is it creates a little bit more closeness. It creates a bit more community. And I think that for a period after that, people were a lot closer, people were a lot kinder. You checked in with your mates a little bit more. But yeah, it was a really difficult time. It was really, really tough.
Did you have many friends or family or know people who chose to leave the region after that? Or did everyone just kind of bond together and say we're sticking around?
None of my family left, but lots of friends, lots of people chose to leave, and I completely understand that. I get it too. Like it was scary. A lot of people decided to go somewhere else for work. A lot of people understood that it would take years to kind of rebuild and have a city again, which is what it took. It took years. It took years to have it properly back to a fun, enjoyable city to be in. But I never had that instinct or desire. Mine was the opposite. I felt more connected to the area and the region, and wanted to stick around. I think more than anything.
Let's stay on a theme, and it's still on a dark theme. You fast forward to 2019, and then we have the mosque shootings in Christchurch. Now, the football community lost 3 members. I mean, obviously, a lot more were lost there. You're playing for Team Wellington at that stage. It's coming towards the semi-finals, and a lot of your friends are probably still on the Canterbury side that are in the semi-finals as well. How far away from everyone's mind is a game of football at that stage, and where is your headspace at leading into kind of that part of the season?
Yeah, it's crazy. You kind of go through everything in a really short little window where you don't give a shit about football in those moments, to be honest. Like the first little bit, like who cares? Like you want people to be safe, you want people to be okay, even though people obviously were not okay, and even today, like it's still like a traumatic thing for a lot of people in this region, and understandably so. It was a horrific incident. It was abhorrent. So you look at it now and you kind of go, I don't know. But part of it too is that sport provides a nice distraction for yourself and for others too. Or probably even in the current, the virus situations that's just been, we've seen a lot of people that are really itching to get back into a sporting environment because it creates community, it creates a connection, it creates a bit of a purpose. So I think there was part of that too. But I remember texting, Tom Schwartz, who's at Canterbury United captain, who I'm really close with as well, and just been like, what's going on? Are you guys playing? Are you traveling? What's the plan? And it was, for both of us, it was a lot of, I don't know. I really don't know. And I remember, talking to Jose at Team Wellington at the time and just going, look, I don't know if I can get on the trip. We'll see what happens, kind of thing. And they were great. They just said, look, take your time. If you can't make it, you can't make it. It's no problem. But I ended up going. I think we were in Hamilton, maybe. And I ended up playing. I talked it through, with my wife, and she was okay with it. She felt safe. She had family around, so yeah, I ended up going up and playing. But I would have been perfectly comfortable saying, no. But for me, it was nice. It was something else to think about.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. So where's Aaron Clapham at now? So you've just come back from coaching tonight. And what is the future? What are you doing for a job? What do you want to do, and what are your goals now?
Can I jump in?
Yeah.
Can we just flip back to where we were before about that game? Because a couple of weeks later, or maybe 3 weeks later, you play in the final and suffer what I believe, I was at the ground, was one of the most horrendous injuries I've seen live. So if listeners aren't aware, Aaron's head came in contact with Andre de Jong's knee. You were unconscious on the pitch for a little bit. I don't know how long.
3 minutes I was unconscious.
Yeah. I remember being in the stands thinking, he's done. Like, it was. I can't put into words how, because I was on that side of the pitch, like how horrible it was. Again, spoke to Andre. He's never watched it back. Have you ever watched it back? No. So yeah. I've never seen it, and I have no recollection of it. So I don't intend on watching it. I don't gain anything by watching it other than some weird voyeurism. But it's I'm not interested in seeing it. That the recollection that you have of it, Seamus, I've had hundreds of people message me and say, look, it was horrific. It's the worst thing I've seen. So yeah, I don't have any recollection of the incident. I'll never watch it if I can help it. But yeah, it was pretty rough. Yeah. I fractured. I had multiple facial fractures. My cheek, my eye socket, my nose. I was unconscious for 3 minutes, which is a long time to be unconscious.
My lip was split, kind of from like my nose down to my lip, right through to the other side. It was pretty bad, and it was rough for a while. You know, it was a good long recovery. Certainly not something that I want to watch or see. But yeah, I managed to fully recover over time and carry on as usual. A few months down the track.
Well, even the return to get back to Christchurch was arduous. I think you couldn't fly because of the nose or the pressure in an aircraft. So you and James from Team Wellington took a rental car, and it was like a 3-day journey to get back to Christchurch?
Oh man, yeah, it was. Yeah, shout out to James. What a guy. Stuck around, missed his flight. You know, he has a family in Wellington as well, and stuck around to look after me. The team all went back on the next morning, early in the morning, but I had to go see an eye specialist to make sure that there were no kind of fractures or anything impeding my vision. So I got the clear from them, and they had told me not to travel at all. They were wanting me to stay up in Auckland to get an appointment to have surgery up there, but they couldn't even give me a date. It was kind of like it will happen in 7 to 14 days, and I was like, "There's no way I'm sticking around like with a family in Christchurch." Previous guest, Dr. Mark Fulcher, got in touch with him. He was great, and he just said, "Look, there's no issues with driving, so jump in a car." So we drove that night to Taupo. Stayed the night there. And then the next day we drove to Wellington, stayed the night there with Scotty, the assistant coach, current head coach. Got on the ferry across the next morning. Got picked up in Picton, another 6-7 hours back down to Christchurch, and I was home. But I tell you what, that ferry ride, that was probably the worst thing. Like going on a shaky ferry with like serious concussion, like pressure in my eye. Oh man, I had this massive black eye. I was by myself at that point, and like people were just looking at me like I was some crazy person. I was kind of just like hunched over on a table, trying to not think about anything. It was horrible.
So rugby players talk about concussion, and a lot have retired from concussion. Quite often, the prescription is to do nothing. What does actually doing nothing when you have a severe concussion look like, and how hard is it to go to everyday life of looking at your phone, reading, like those sorts of tasks which maybe you take for granted when you have a concussion? How difficult is that?
Oh, it's terrible. It's really difficult, and not enough people take it seriously. Like people that have concussion, like they rush back into sport. I see it all the time. It's absolutely crazy. So I waited till I was cleared by medical professionals, and then I waited even longer. But that first little period was really hard. Everything is just not functioning properly. My thought process was so slow. I'd forget words for weeks. You know, I'd be mid-sentence and the word wouldn't just come. And you start thinking like, shit, is this what my brain's like forever? This is horrible. Thankfully, I didn't get too many headaches. My headaches cleared pretty quickly. But yeah, the ability to concentrate, I couldn't read. I couldn't look at a screen. So no computers, no phones, no laptops. Pretty much nothing. Like it's really like they say do nothing, and you have to try and do nothing. It's really hard to do. But I'd get tired really quickly. The first week I'd have to take like 2 naps a day. It was really, really tough. But over time, slowly get better, and you chip away at the rehab. Eventually you get to a point where you feel good and you feel comfortable. And then quite a bit further down that track, I decided I'd get back to playing.
Geez, she's been a fairly grim sort of last 15, Shay. We've gone earthquakes into mosque shootings, into worst injury of his career, into concussion.
I was going to line it up with a Chatham Cup win.
We need something.
I was going to ask you about 2014 Chatham Cup win, Kashmir Technical. Back-to-back Chatham Cups, that doesn't happen. You missed 2013, but you played 2014?
Yeah, I wasn't involved in 2013, but that was probably the main reason I jumped into winter football in 2014. I watched the Chatham Cup final and the semi-final in 2013, and just saw how special that was. So I was pretty keen to get involved in 2014, and we had a great run. It was it's such a special competition. It's so hard to win. I think even after that, there's probably been There's probably been a couple of occasions where I think our Kashmir technical team was the best winter team in the country, and we didn't win. I think we were better than that 2014 team as well, but we won in that 2014 year. It's a very difficult competition to win, so that's pretty special. That's something that I'll cherish, and I've got some pretty special memories of that year.
Aaron, I'm going to go a slightly different direction now because I want to talk about your TV career, because I remember when you were bursting on the scene. It was around the sort of 2008, 9, 10, when you were an All White. You were a What Now star. And I remember thinking at the time, geez, is he doing this? Is he going in a different direction? Is he giving away the football? Because I sort of saw you in a lot of places. I wasn't watching a lot of What Now, but I knew you were also What happened? Because I actually thought you were a genuine talent. You were very comfortable on the screen. What happened to that? Did that just sort of stop, or have there been any TV gigs since then? And how did that come about?
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. I basically fell into it. I wasn't pursuing it. I've never pursued it. I enjoyed it. I was a broke, struggling, want to be professional footballer. And because I just came back from the World Cup, they asked me to come on the show as a guest. And the studio's in Christchurch. So I jumped on as a guest. It was fun. Had a bit of a laugh. And then a couple of weeks later, they called me and asked if I wanted to do some work for them. And I told them I had no idea what I was doing. But if you want to give me some money to have a bit of a laugh and joke around, I'm happy to do it. So that's kind of how it eventuated. And then I kept coming back. And then I was on another show that was in the same studio, the Aaron Simpson show, which was more of like an after-school type one. Which again, they were just, nothing I ever pursued. But, I was always looking for, a part-time job to keep the bills paid. And that was a nice, fun one. So it just kind of, over time, it just kind of faded away. You say no to a couple of things and then they stop calling you, or they move on, or you move outside of the age demographic of the show is probably more realistic. But yeah, not something I've ever pursued. But I really enjoyed it. It was really fun, and a nice way to make a little bit of money on the side.
Well, this is going to put you back on the map, I reckon. The old YouTube Between Two Beers clocks up about sort of 200 views. It's going to,
That could be it. It could be one of the views I need to have my next TV career.
Can we look back? Did you get invited to Aaron Simpson's wedding to former bachelor Zach? I can't remember his last name. Franich? No. I fell out of touch with Erin. She's a lovely girl, though. She's very nice. I enjoyed working with her on the show. But no, I wasn't one of the invites to the wedding, I'm afraid. 2 wedding questions I've asked tonight that have both fallen flat. I might shelve the wedding angle for future episodes, I think.
Yeah. Well, let's get to current day Clapham. Like I said, you've returned from coaching tonight. What are you doing for a job at the moment? And like I said before, what are your goals? What do you want to be?
Did you ask that question before and I just didn't answer? I forgot about deja vu.
Shay made the executive decision that it was a shit question, but
I went, let's continue down the dark path that we were down rather than
weddings. So my job now, I'm a director of football at Kashmir Technical. So Kashmir Technical is a very big club in Christchurch. We've got about 1,500 members. So I've been the director of football there for the last 5 years, which has been great. I've really enjoyed that. Going down the coaching pathway as well. I'm halfway through my A license at the moment, so I'm definitely doing a lot more coaching. During that 5 years, I've been pretty active in the coaching community down here. Coaching, I coach 5 nights a week during the season, so I'm always out on the grass coaching and, again, trying to improve, trying to get better on that front. I love coaching. I really enjoy that. I enjoy the director of football side of it as well, kind of looking at some of the, the overall vision and the bigger picture as well, which is really enjoyable. So I certainly see myself working more in that space over the next few years in various roles. I'd love to be involved in the national team setup, coaching in that area too, something that I'm really passionate about. I love football. I love New Zealand. So it's a nice connection where I definitely want to be involved in.
So is the long-term goal to be a professional head coach at a professional team, an A-League team, or like the All Whites coach? Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, I would love to do those things, and that's certainly something that I'll pursue. But I'm not naive either. There's literally 2 of those jobs in this country. So if you're putting all your eggs into that basket, you're a pretty silly person. So would I love to do those? Absolutely, that would be amazing. But I'm not going to sit here and go, that's the path, that's what I'm doing. Nothing else is important. I'm going to pursue that with all I've got because, there's 2 of those jobs, and they're very, very hard to come by. Historically, not many New Zealanders get those jobs.
That's true. Shay, you're our list guy. How are we looking?
I think we're done. I think we're done. We've done next step. I've done flopped wedding questions. I've got the only last thing I've got, but I'm scared it'll be a flop as well, was just around drinking games in Christchurch involving only being able to go to the toilet in a bucket under the table in Western FC days or Western Flyers.
Yeah, it's not a flop, really.
Just another flop. You can just write that one off as a flop if you want. We don't need to address it.
Don't ask me about the list then.
Aaron, thank you so much for your time. It's been great. Covered a lot of ground, and hopefully the audience has enjoyed learning about your journey. Look forward to seeing you around the traps. Shay, last thoughts?
Yeah, it was a great episode. Really articulate, really thoughtful. I really enjoyed that. That was awesome. So thank you for your time. All the best for coaching. Thanks to Jess and Emerson for letting you stay up so late, and all the best with the new arrival on the way as well.
Thank you very much, guys. I enjoyed it. Like I said, I'm a big fan of the pod. I love it. Keep up the good work, and I look forward to hearing some more episodes soon.
Cheers, Aaron.
And we are